All white people are racist. Every last one of them. And I can prove it. 2 years ago, I actually believed nonsense rhetoric like this. This was me. But since then, I have gone from marching with Black Lives Matter to making very angry Black Lives Matter videos just like this one. Okay, so all lives matter. America hasn't shown us that all lives matter. They've shown us that white lives matter the most and everything else comes after. To being named as recipient of the Little Rock Nine Scholarship, which is of course in reference to one of the most horrendous racial discrimination stories in American history, consisting of 9 African American students who attended Little Rock Central High School in 1957.
I have therefore, in accordance with the solemn responsibility and the oath of my office, taken the following action. Units of the National Guard have been and are now being mobilized with the mission to maintain or restore the peace and good order of this community.
Graduating from the Clinton School of Public Service and even meeting President Bill Clinton. To having a complete change in my political perspective. During this 2-year period, I spent a lot of time confused about a lot of things. So when confused, I do what I've always done, which is ask questions, right? And some of them being uncomfortable questions. Why do so many white people not understand that systemic racism and the generational psychology and ramifications of slavery are real things? Why do so many white people and conservatives ignore racism and pretend like it doesn't even exist at all? Or at the very least have, some sort of impact on some people's quality of life.
I would not say just broadly that we have systemic racism.
To be clear, do you believe systemic racism exists here?
No, I don't.
I don't know what systemic racism means. There's systemic racism, Mr. Forrest.
No, I don't think there's systemic racism.
Me, when they suggest that somehow this is not a matter of individual responsibility, but it somehow is systemic, that just doesn't ring true to me.
Why do so many liberals blame everything on racism, sexism, and patriarchy, and all the other isms? Why do so many Black Americans ignore words like accountability and self-improvement and pretend like they don't exist? Conservatives never talk about Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, and liberals never talk about Thomas Sowell, right? And I want to know why that is. Welcome back to another episode of the Ruling Class Podcast, and of course, I'm your host, Demetrius Jordan, or better known as Didi, back up in this bitch with another video. Please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Here's my journey on how I went from the far left to the far right, and to the not so common ground between the two. Why are Black people always at the bottom and placed last in everything? I'm sure I'm not the only so-called Black person to feel this way or to ask this question as a child. Growing up in a small town of about 15,000 people, my high school had about a 325 graduating class size. Of that 325, we may have had about 3 white people in our entire class. And it wasn't because there was no white people in my hometown, but it was because they attended a completely different school on another side of this very small town, right? But why? Decades after Jim Crow and the Civil Rights era, is this still a thing in the 21st century? What was so bad about me and my classmates that caused all these white people to enroll their children on a side of town where we never even crossed paths or even saw them? That caused me to do some research on the school, and it turned out that their school seemed to have a much better education system and more funding than my school had. At the time, I didn't understand state and local revenue, property taxes, and access to local resources, which all contribute to primary source of funding for public schools. In fact, my research for this video revealed to me that by 2012, which is the year I graduated high school, Arkansas, which is the state that I was in at the time, ranked 48th out of 50 states in terms of per pupil expenditures, according to the data from National Education Association's Rankings and Estimates report. This ranking suggests that Arkansas had relatively low levels of school funding compared to other states during that year. At the time, though, all I knew was that it seemed as if white people attended all the better schools and presided in better neighborhoods than anyone that I knew. And the portrayal of white people on television always seemed to paint them as smarter, more articulate, right, cleaner, richer, with a happier life. The life that I knew was riddled with poverty, violence, drugs, agony, alcohol, disease, more violence, guns, and more poverty. And most of the people in my vicinity were Black Americans. So whether I realized it at the time or not, this subconsciously made me feel like I was less than or not worthy of the same benefits as white people. It seemed as though their life and everything they had was just better. Not only am I black, but I'm dirt poor as well. This seemed inseparable and synonymous to me at the time, being black and poor, that is, right? So just like that, based on the things that I was experiencing through elementary and high school as a black person, combined with the things I experienced or I noticed once I was in college, this without a doubt perpetuated a victimhood mentality that I didn't even realize I had adopted. I was taught to believe that all white people were racist and hated me just because of who I am. They will always be the ones with the most power due to getting a head start because of slavery. So I would always have these strikes against me, right? It caused me to envy white people and the privilege they seem to have or innately have over me. And even after leaving my hometown for college, I continued to envy white people. In fact, I'll go a step further. I had an even deeper hatred or anger specifically for white college girls because I was attracted to many of them, but never felt like I was good enough, right? They came from more money than I did, seemed to be more educated, right? Had higher expectations than to date someone like me. And almost seemed disgusted that I even existed. Or was it just all in my head? I couldn't tell. Even after almost being killed in a car accident and being homeless for more than 2 years, although it was mostly white people who helped me during this time, I continued to secretly envy white people. But that's a video for another day. Stay tuned for that. Then 2020 hit. Among the multitude of things that transpired that year that no one saw coming, from the pandemic, the lockdown, all the different police shootings, that was the year I began graduate school at the Clinton School of Public Service. Lucky me. It was also the year I was inspired to start my own podcast, obviously, right? Following the George Floyd murder. I wanted to talk about things like race and politics, right? All the things that people say you shouldn't talk about. I remember very vividly hearing for the first time Dr. Umar Johnson making the very controversial proclamation that all white people are racist, merely by association at the very least.
So all white people are racist. See, the reason why we have trouble understanding that all white people are racist is we think racism is about emotions. We think racism is about attitude. Racism is not about emotion. Racism is not about attitude. Racism is not about character. Racism is about power and privilege. Let me say it again. Power and privilege. Let me say it again. White people can love you. Some of y'all got white folks who really care about you as a person. One nigga, one. Did y'all hear me? No. Under white supremacy, every white person can like one black person. You might be the one. Good job.
You know, and I was torn with this statement because, as ridiculous as it sounded, I understood the premise of the idea. But I knew from experiences that this statement just couldn't be true. And then I attended my very first Black Lives Matter protest. And it was weird. Very weird. I got tired of hearing people say all lives matter to discount the Black Lives Matter slogan.
So I had a friend reach out to me and said, Demetrius, I want your opinion on something. I have a family member that's upset with me. I said, okay. And she said, well, this family member is upset because she was posting something on social media that said Black Lives Matter. Now, this is a Caucasian friend of mine, and this is her Caucasian family member. And she said, my family member is upset with me. I said, why is she upset? She said, because she said Black Lives Matter. And I asked her, why can't you say all lives matter? Am I wrong for that, Demetrius? Let me explain to you in 3 points what I told her.
Okay, so all lives matter. America hasn't shown us that all lives matter. They've shown us that white lives matter the most and everything else comes after. But this movement has been emotionally driven by the fact that predominantly so-called black men and some women have been mistreated, profiled, and by cops. That's facts. You can't dispute that. This movement is about the forever, never-ending social injustices within this country. So when you say all lives matter, not just black lives, well, of course all lives matter. We get that. That's not what this is about. But it comes off as selfish when you're including yourself in a title slogan when people that look like you aren't facing the same disadvantages, which is what the origin of this is. Don't lose that. Number 2, racism. It is your duty as a human being to speak out. Wrong is wrong. Let me also be clear. There are many different forms of racism.
Racism isn't just about what you're saying or what you're doing. It's also about what you don't say and what you don't do.
I believe that Black Lives Matter. That's what I said. Anybody with a functioning brain understands that all lives matter. But right now, there is a portion of our community that is frustrated and they are suffering and they are hurting. So as an empathetic Christian, I'm going to go and say, I agree. Black lives do matter. But I was glad some people disagreed with me because I kept saying, do Black Lives Matter? Yes or no? Yes, but. I'm like, there is no but. We disagree. Those are the same type of people that would have interrupted Jesus during the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus would have been like, blessed are the poor. No, Jesus, blessed are all people. Since when does highlighting one issue disparage another? Are we not secure enough to be able to sit here and go issue by issue and just talk about one without disparaging another? Of course, all lives matter, but it's okay to say Black Lives Matter. All lives matter. No kidding. That's why we're saying Black Lives Matter, because until all lives matter equally, we need to focus on this.
I would hear different stories about what happened during these protests, so after the George Floyd murder that we all witnessed on camera, I decided to go to a protest and experience it for myself. And it was then that I realized that groupthink is one of the most powerful yet dangerous practices that there is. Because it not only encourages people not to think for themselves, but it prevents people from doing their own research and asking questions. Most of the people that was out there at the protest had no clue what they were doing and seemed to be waiting on the next person to say or do something so they can just follow, along and go with their lead. Everything from the awkward moments of silence to this very small number of white people at the very back of the crowd, right, blasting the very dangerous and incredibly hateful F the Police song by Boosie and Webby. I mean, I've never been a follower, so in real time while this was happening, I decided to do the unthinkable. I made sure that my hands were clearly in sight and out of my pockets. I walked out into the street and approached a group of police officers standing there with their batons in hand and their guns on their hips. And I asked these 3 simple questions. Do you mind if I ask you all a question? The white female officer turned and happily said, yeah, sure. I then said, I understand that there's tension in the air, chants from the more than 400 people that's out here. But you all do realize that everyone out here does not find or believe that all police officers are the same, right? Multiple police officers quickly assured me, that in fact, they did realize that and that they knew that many of the people that were in attendance were just there to express themselves or came to just be spectators. Then my last question for them was, so the challenge for you all is, how do you assure these same people that you do not see all of them the same? I began to walk away, and it was then I realized all the people that were staring at me in complete amazement and confusion. I continued walking to my car, and as I did, I saw a water bottle fly across the air, and all hell broke loose.
Niggas finna get bad out here. They telling people to get out the road, yo. Okay, yep. It's over now. Oh. It's over now. It's over now. It's over now. Bro, they tripping, bro. Bro, they tripping, bro.
I can't breathe! I can't breathe! I can't breathe!
What happened? Bro, look at this truck. They tripping. They started throwing water bottles. Like, bro, what y'all doing? Like, why would you do that, bro? Bro. Oh my goodness. Bro, look at this, man.
That left a pretty bad taste in my mouth about the whole Black Lives Matter protesting experience and made me question why no one at these protests was talking about the lack of God, black on black crime, the destructive music industry, and the glorification of rappers as role models in these communities.
Black people that get on the radio every day in white-owned companies, white-owned stations with white-owned sponsors that play the role of hypersexualized, hypercriminalized male. I asked these advertisers, I say, I've got hundreds of songs a day that celebrate killing animals. Will you put them on your station? They said, no. I got hundreds of songs a day that talk about assaulting women and abusing kids. Would you put them on your station? They said, no. I said, I got hundreds of songs a day day that talk about murdering blacks. Would you put them on your stations? They said, well, that depends. Depends on what? Who it's done by and who it's branded for. Because if we can get black folks to sing about it, and we can brand it for our youngest black audiences, I think there's money to be made. I think there's American appetites to see these people that way. I said, how can you say that? They said, well, look, it's what these artists know. It's what they, black people, create. It's, matter of fact, our surveys say it's what they want to hear, which speaks of a sickness. How do we live in a society where somebody says, you know what, I'm inspired to write a song that celebrates murdering another person. And then a person says, I'd like to put that on my station. Another person said, I'd like to pay for it. And then there's people out here in the audience that go, I'd love to hear it, as long as it's black guys. Because even white people buy rap music, buy this type of stuff, because we know that when we want to hear about killing each other, we know who to turn to for that type of inspiration. We call it our music. We say we own it. White people buy more rap than black people. Yeah, but we're very careful to turn it down at the stoplight when other black people are there. Why? Because we know we're just pretending. For them, it's more authentic and real. I always ask the companies, what about your name? What about your brand? What about your value? And the largest radio company in the world said this: it's okay that we only have drug dealers on our black youth stations. We only have murders on our black youth stations. We support black charities. We give out water at the Martin Luther King parade. I think we've got it covered. We've bought them off. Now, people get upset, the smartest guys in the room again. You're talking about censorship. I don't believe that. I believe in free art. Make whatever you want. I believe you should make music about anti-Semitism. I believe you should make music about killing dogs. I believe in this country you should make music about bashing homosexuals and driving them behind trucks. I believe you should make music about stringing people up on trees. I believe you should make music about killing whitey. I believe you should make all that music. But I also believe that in the mainstream marketplace, people should hesitate associating their name with certain content. You know, there's certain stuff you can't buy at the store. Certain stuff you can't get on iTunes because their brand doesn't want it. But if you want to hear black people celebrating killing black people, they got thousands and thousands and thousands of those things to sell you. I don't think it's about censorship. I think it's about American cultural hypocrisy. Because here's the truth. These black entertainers, they can't sing just about anything. There's some stuff that'll get them fired. And they get dropped, and they get fired, and they get slapped on the wrist, and they get disciplined all the time. Why? Because sometimes they step over the bounds. A very famous case is what happened with Rick Ross. Rick Ross is the Mammy Two Shoes, one of the many Mammy Two Shoes of our day. He's a black entertainer in a world carved out for him, and a role carved out for him by white entertainment companies. And one day he talked about, in the middle of a song that celebrated dealing drugs and killing blacks, he made a reference to date. And when he made that reference to date, that set social media on fire. That got 100,000 petitions in 24 hours. Hey, buddy, date rape is no joke. That had white people standing outside of Reebok in New York saying, you better take this seriously. We're tired of a rape culture in America. One line in one song moved the masses. And you know what Reebok did? Did they stand by him and say, hey, we believe in freedom of speech. We believe in freedom of expression. It's just a song. Calm down. No, they fired his tail on the spot. The president came out and said, this goes against our high standards. He's gone against the values of our brand. Shame on Rick Ross. We're disappointed. He doesn't know how serious date rape is. And when I saw that, I thought, wow, how convenient. Isn't that amazing? But here's what really happened. It's not their brand. It's not their values. Rick Ross went off script. He was hired to get black customers, and they think that black customers go with black bait. And in America, black bait is the hyper-criminalized, hypersexualized portrayal of black people. And as long as he had sung about that, the stuff that got him hired, he still have a job at Reebok. But when he touched other sensitivities that affect us, he lost his job. See, the truth is, it's not they that need to change. It's we that need to change. We created the lies. We created them for our profit. We own the companies. We own the record labels. We own the advertisers, and we keep putting it out. And it's this that's got to change. I thought about it. You know what? I wonder if White Mike could get anybody's attention on this. So I stood outside of a Walmart, and I said, hey, I don't think cops and blacks is very cool. And you know what? It only took 7 weeks of Mike standing out there, and they wrote a letter and said, yeah, we don't think it's cool either. We're going to pull our name off of that. The largest retailer in the world had never considered that maybe their commercial shouldn't be right before or after a song about young black men being gunned down. And I realized this, that black murder is normal, but it should not be. And I realized the importance at the coffee table, at every headline, every pastor's gathering, every family gathering to say, you know what, these black lives matter. It's not just another black kid. These are human beings. I'm doing my best in every way, shape, and form. Talks like this everywhere I can go to say, you know what, I was born in a world where black murder was normal. My kids were born into a world where black murder is normal, but I don't want to die in a world where black murder is normal. Am I 5 years or 10 years away? I don't know, but I'm screaming as high as I can. Let's feel this pain, and let's lift our voice to tell the lies. They are not criminals, they are not deviants, and their lives are just as important as ours.
The breakdown of the family, lack of education, or what I like to call, father deficiency, which is not only the absence of a father in the home, but it's the absence of a good father in the home, right?
More than 72% of children in the African American community are born out of wedlock.
It just seemed hypocritical and counterproductive to just randomly come out and protest police officers that did not commit the crimes that we were upset about, and scream hatred about white people who, once again, did not personally commit the crimes that we were upset about. And when you look at the media, they didn't focus on these issues either. They added to the incomplete narrative surrounding the black struggle. The next thing that happened that year only added to my political transition. About a month after the protests, I became friends with someone who had mutual friends with me. He and I ended up getting a drink one day and had our first full conversation. And it was about the George Floyd incident. And this is a white guy, by the way. He told me that he did not believe that George Floyd had been murdered. He talked about George Floyd resisting arrest, having a counterfeit $20 bill and having drugs found in the system, all the usual talking points and usual things that are mentioned by the opposing side that has absolutely nothing to do with the murder itself, but they always mention it. And I've always been open to hearing, other people's opinions on other topics. But I was 100% convinced that the only reason that this person felt this way was because George Floyd was a black man, right? Then he said something to me I never forgot. Even if I am wrong about this and you convince me otherwise, just hear me when I say that I am the furthest thing from racist. And this has nothing to do with the fact of him being black. I just believe that the media runs with the race narrative to control black Americans' emotions and to get them riled up. And it works every time without many black Americans paying attention to the facts. When's the last time you actually listened to someone who doesn't think the way that you do? When he said that, I really sat there and marinated in what he had just said to me because, I had never heard it put that way before, right? The media uses the word racism to play on black Americans' emotions to get them riled up. And even though I ended up convincing him that George Floyd was without a doubt murdered by Derek Chauvin, his words stuck with me and eventually led me to find people like Steven Crowder, Candace Owens, Officer Tatum, Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, Thomas Sowell, etc. Before, I would have never even thought to listen to them because I had always heard that white people who are on the right are extreme racists and black people who are on the right are coons and sellouts and bootlickers that hate themselves trying to impress white people. All the usual names that they're called. And then I stumbled across this viral video of rapper T.I. and Candace Owens. My mind was blown.
Because you're making light of...
No, I'm not.
You're making light of the enslavement of people that look like us. You can't make light of that. That ain't nothing you breeze over.
I haven't even finished the sentence. How am I making light of anything?
You started with some bullshit.
Okay.
I had actually seen the video a couple of years before, and while not really knowing who Candace Owens was yet, I was very angry with her for going in on the black community so ruthlessly. But now, just 2 years later, with an open mind, I felt completely different. She wasn't being ruthless. She was simply being honest. She stated nothing but facts about the black American culture, quote unquote, the media, and even about Trump.
So the things that I pay attention to are the numbers. I pay attention to the birth rates in this country, which is why I'm pro putting something down to stop illegal immigration. The second thing that I think is really important, and you may have heard me testify in front of Congress, is the illiteracy rates that are facing black America. 75% of black boys in California can't pass a reading exam. Across Baltimore, they looked at 5 schools. They couldn't find a single black boy that was a single black child that could pass a basic reading or a math exam. So I caught a lot of slack because I said, this is a Democrat plantation, but I meant what I said. If you look historically at what the plantations were when we were slaves, there were 3 things that were necessary for them to run. The first was our ignorance. Black Americans were not allowed to learn how to read unless we would have our limbs chopped off. And that was because an educated mind cannot be enslaved. So the fact that our schools are in this condition in the inner cities and all throughout America and not a single candidate is talking about it is problematic to me. I think that that's a huge negotiating tool for me. We need to be talking about the inner city schools. Another component, and this is the biggest issue that I think is facing black America today, which was important to maintaining the plantations, was the breakdown of family. The biggest issue facing black America is father absence. We have children that are growing up without their fathers in the home, and that is being incentivized by the government right now via the welfare system. When the government says we'll give you more money if you don't marry the father of your children, you are incentivizing bad behavior in our community. What happens when you remove a father from the home? This is why I do not mess with feminism at all. I'm not with it. This breakdown and mocking masculinity, making it seem like there's something wrong to be a man, all of this contributes to the breakdown of family.
And the crowd full of black people, full of black adults, booed her.
When you remove...
y'all, hey, hold on. So, hold on, brother, hold on. There's going to be an opportunity for each of you to engage. But I want to make sure this sister has the right to talk while she's here. That's why we invited her. So let her say what she needs to say, and then let's keep it moving. Come on, y'all.
Everything changed for me after I saw this video the second time. This led to many months of research on conservatism and its values. I realized more than ever before how lost, arrogant, and toxic many black Americans are in our own ignorance, right? After watching many of his YouTube interviews and even reading his books, I was shocked as well-known social theorist and author Thomas Sowell eloquently highlighted the many hypocrisies of liberalism, right? Such as the fact that liberals never speak about the fact that slavery has existed worldwide throughout history and not just in America. And it wasn't just black people who were slaves either.
But reparations is a specific conversation about a specific time in America, and that is black people were slaves.
Article that got a lot of attention in The Atlantic a couple of years ago called The Case for Reparations by Ta-Nehisi Coates. Quote, white supremacy is a force so fundamental to America that it is difficult to imagine the country without it. Reparations is the price we must pay to see ourselves squarely. Close quote.
Nobody needs a handout. Reparations is not a handout. Reparations is restitution. If white people don't believe in handouts, why did America give free land to poor white people? If white people don't believe in handouts, why did America give the GI Bill to white people? If white people don't believe in handouts, why does most welfare checks go to white people?
And Tom Sowell, who actually saw Jim Crow with his own eyes and experienced it, responds how?
It would be nice to know his evidence for what he said, just to be old-fashioned about it. No, it was a rotten system. But I don't know how we get from that to reparations. I mean, what we see in the United States in terms of the bad things, you see all around the world. If you were to give reparations to everyone whose ancestors had been slaves, I suspect that you would have to give reparations to more than half the entire population of the globe.
While acknowledging that slavery hindered the economic development of societies where it was prevalent, Thomas Sowell also emphasized the importance of examining, the outcomes of different groups after emancipation rather than solely focusing on the history of slavery itself. He also emphasized the importance of considering, cultural factors, when discussing the impact of slavery. He contends that cultural values and practices such as the emphasis on education, strong family values, family structures, can have a substantial impact on a group's socioeconomic outcome, even when they have a history of oppression. This made so much sense to me when I first came across it that I wanted to just shout it, from the rooftops, right? I wanted everyone to hear this. I felt like my spirit had just been fed and a lifelong secret had been revealed to me, right? Culture, right? Not just racism, right? Not just white people, not just slavery, not just oppression, but culture. Yes, of course, you can't overlook slavery, but if you change your current culture, you can change a lot of your circumstances. I never heard anyone say that before. All I had ever heard was slavery and racism. This made me feel more in control and responsible for my own actions. It also gave me incredible insight into some of the questions I've had since a child about my environment and about, quote unquote, Black American culture. It all made sense now. I can make an entirely separate video on Thomas Sowell and the many quote unquote controversial things he said over the years that has upset many liberals and or Black Americans, right? If you would like to see an entire video on Thomas Sowell, please comment Thomas Sowell below, and that will be one of my next videos. Is conservatism the answer to our problems in the black community? You know, I asked myself this question for a while because conservatism made so much sense. It highlighted limited government, individual liberty, personal responsibility, self-reliance, morality, and family values in a refreshing way that I had never seen or heard before. But that's not all it did. I quickly realized that conservatism and liberalism are two wings of the same bird. What do I mean? Just as liberals are accused of political correctness, exaggerating the harm of free speech, right, undermining traditional moral values and societal norms, in the same token, conservatives can be accused of insufficient recognition of systemic racism, or even just racism itself, exaggerating the impact of things like affirmative action while undermining the systemic barriers and socioeconomic disparities that Black Americans have disproportionately experienced throughout the history of America, right? They never talk about that. Let's take someone like Officer Tatum, one of the largest conservative voices on social media. At first, I appreciated his content because he unapologetically spoke out about the problems in Black America, right? He held us accountable. He called it like it was and how we need to take more accountability for our own actions. But then I noticed a trend with him.
People love to tell you that black people can't be racist. Listen, I've been black my whole life, and I grew up in an all-black neighborhood, and black people are the most racist people that I know.
And many other conservatives, for that matter. He not only politicized everything, but he only took the most outrageous incidents that were recorded on video or broadcasted on the news about black people, and he disingenuously generalized the entire community as if most Black Americans behave or think the same way as the people he was criticizing. If you show enough examples of extreme situations, you can convince people that it's normal in that community, right? Or as the allegedly once said, if you repeat a lie often enough, it becomes the truth. This suggests that through consistent repetition, falsehoods or extreme views can be perceived as the truth by influencing people's beliefs and perceptions. Not only that, but he never has an effective solution to the problem. Instead, he seems to be dedicated to making money off the sometimes exaggerated narrative he's painted on his channel to a mostly white audience. The Hodge twins or the conservative twins are the same way. They are probably even better examples, actually.
Hey, Kev, remember that show National Geographic where, oh man, you finna say something crazy as hell. Now, remember how the white man used to go out there looking, like, talking about Africa? Look, there's the wild lion. And look at the wildebeest. He's just eating grass. He doesn't see nothing. Look at the the lion. It's approaching. I'll take that same white man with that European voice and he just do it like,
look at the African American woman. She has the propensity for violence. Jesse owns this fool.
Yeah. Oh, Jesse. You know what? Jesse hung this nigga.
It was a political lynching. That's what Jesse would say.
Them feet was swinging after this.
That nigga was swinging from side to side.
It was just like this. It feels like this.
Now, them feet was doing like this.
No.
Look, you know how you hang somebody like this? They doing this?
What the hell wrong with you?
And they just started swinging like that. Because that was a political lynching.
They never make fun of the white community as a community itself. In fact, anytime they seem to cover anyone non-black or non-Hispanic, the criticism will not be related to race at all, but most likely be centered around that person's political beliefs or sexual orientation. But if you notice, they never show the not so extreme liberals that disagree with conservatism but make good points or make great points. They never talk about those people on their channel. That goes for Candace Owens, Matt Walsh, Steven Crowder, and the list goes on. They never talk about the disadvantages many of these communities are facing. They never talk about the 18.8% of the black population that is living in poverty, while only 10.5% of the overall population in this country is in poverty, right? They never talk about why majority of CEOs are white American men and how history plays a role in how these things have led to the way that they are today, right? For instance, a 2020 study by the nonprofit organization Alliance for Broad Diversity, or ABD, and Deloitte found that among Fortune 500 companies, 79.4% of CEOs were white. Or let's break this down even more. Let's talk about economic disparities, right? In 2020, the median household income for black households was $47,934 a year compared to $76,057 for white households, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. The black poverty rate was 18.8% in 2020, higher than the white poverty rate of 7.3%, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, right? The black unemployment rate in May 2021 was 9.1% compared to the white unemployment rate of 5.1%, right? Well, let's talk about education disparities, right? Black students have lower high school graduation rates compared to their white counterparts. In the 2018-2019 school year, the high school graduation rate for the black students was 79%, while it was 89% for high school students that were white, right? Access to, quality education can be limited due to factors like school funding disparities, resource allocation, and systemic inequities. Well, let's talk about the criminal justice system, right? The disparities there. Black Americans are overrepresented in the criminal justice system. Despite making up about 13% of the U.S. population, black individuals represent a disproportionate share of the incarcerated population. Black individuals are more likely to be arrested, receive harsher sentences, and face racial profiling and bias in the criminal justice system. But let's not stop there. Let's talk about health disparities, right? Black Americans experience disparities in healthcare access and health outcomes. They have higher rates of certain health conditions such as hypertension, diabetes, and certain cancers. Infant mortality rates for black infants are higher compared to white infants. Or we can talk about housing disparities. Black Americans face challenges related to housing discrimination, limited access to affordable housing, and disparities in home ownership rates. In 2020, the home ownership rate for black households was 44.1%, while it was 74.5% for white households. Not to mention, as a side note, last year I conducted Arkansas's very first analysis on home data or home or housing discrimination amongst the white and black population, right? If you want to check that out, check out the link in the description. It's on my website. Why is it that they don't dive into these statistics and history's role in why these numbers exist? Why is that, right? It perpetuates more hatred, more stereotypes, less solutions, and less God. That brings me to my last point, God. Not all of them, but majority of these conservatives will claim to believe in God, specifically the God of the Bible. But when you actually pay close attention to their channels, their message, the content that they release, it has very little to do with God. At all, actually. They never cite or quote scriptures, and they don't attempt to be holy or biblical in their approach to these societal issues. And they don't heavily encourage people to follow Jesus Christ. Ever. I mean, they might mention God here and there, but they don't actually abide by the scriptures. They don't heavily, infiltrate that in their message or in their content. They almost never talk about it, right? In fact, it is my opinion that someone like Officer Tatum uses the name of Jesus Christ in the religion of Christianity, so to speak, to virtue signal to Christians just to get more views and make more money on his channel.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are selling out of these hats. The flamest, most fire hat that I've ever developed, and it's real comfortable, man. This is flex fit. I mean, this is the greatest hat ever. We got the whiskey glasses back. We got all our new merch. We got women merch. We got it all. Go to the Officer Tatum store and find something that you love.
He, nor most of these other conservatives, are actually for what they claim, because if they were, they would not behave in a very similar fashion as their contemporaries on the left. Instead, they participate in the circus as clowns themselves. The writing is on the wall. Conservatives are just like liberals. They just make a different argument, right? Does that make sense? And they know it. There are two wings of the same bird headed in the same direction. More confusion. They are both seeking attention, money, and/or power while masquerading behind their personal agendas, political ideologies, and beliefs. Don't you get it? Can't you see it? The life that I knew as a child was riddled with poverty, violence, drugs, agony, alcohol, and disease. But many other children of different ethnicities, including white children, can say the exact same thing, right? It just so happened that we, the Black American population, we experience it at a disproportionate rate, right? We are all human and are faced with different challenges in this life. Self-accountability and a strong family structure are extremely important to a person's success, but that doesn't alleviate the racism, oppression, and obstacles certain groups have had to disproportionately face in this country for decades. Liberals, conservatives, why can't all these things be true at the same time? That's what I want to know. There is no liberalism, there is no conservatism, or any other political party for that matter. There are only believers in Jesus Christ and non-believers. I suggest that many of you seek God and don't get too caught up in politics, because neither party is advocating for your eternal soul, which is what is most important, right? Always remember, everything you see is temporary. Everything you can't see is eternal. I hope this video found y'all well, man. Until next time, peace.